Hi, this is Janelle MacKay back again for the second part of my video tutorial to make the Aspen Crossbody Bag. In the first video, we did all of the lining pieces, and now we're going to start with step 5 and to make the exterior panels, and then we'll finish up the strap and then we'll be done. So we're starting with the exterior front pocket, and for that we'll need our short zipper that we made earlier. We cut those in the part 1 video, and if you didn't cut those yet, the cutting directions are right at the front of step 5. So now you should have a zipper length that matches the exact width of the exterior front pocket. So we'll need the exterior front pocket cut from the outer, exterior front pocket lining number 1, and exterior front pocket lining number 2. Pocket lining number 1 is only 7.5 inches long. It is shorter than the lining 2 by 1/2 inch. Okay, so we'll put that on your fabric, or sorry, on your work surface right side up, and then the zipper over top of that right side up, but with the zipper pull on the right when it's closed. So I do like to use my double-sided tape to stick this in place right across the top there, like so, and then peel off the back, and we'll just put that zipper on there straight as possible. I'm going to be putting on the exterior front pocket now, but this one I'm doing is in wax canvas, so double-sided tape won't really stick to that. There's no point. So I'll just use the clips that I have for that. So I'll just place that on top, line up the top edges, and clip along here. If you have cotton, again, use the double-sided tape or pin. We're going to stitch across here using our 3/8 seam allowance once again, just along here, and our zipper foot. So then when we're done, you can open up the pieces and expose the zipper and press these back. Now I've done that on the large version right here. So I used double-sided tape on this one. When I got to here, I pulled the zipper back and stitched, and then I put the zipper back again, and then I pressed this back and also this back. So now when we flip it, this is the front of my bag, the exterior fabric, and that's the lining. This is all pressed nicely, and now I'm just going to top stitch straight along the zipper there, and I'll be back with that in just a second. Okay, I've done my top stitching along the zipper there, and as you can see, I've got my outer fabric and my lining pocket number 1. Now if you want a softer feel to your bag, you can put fleece on this exterior part. We will be adding fleece to the whole panel after, so it's not that important, but if you find that later when you make the bag and you're making a second, because I know you will, you can always add fleece there. So then you can get your exterior front pocket lining number 2 and place that unit right over top, right side up. We're just going to pin along the zipper, along the bottoms, and baste. I like to do a basting stitch that is 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch inside the seam line, because our final stitching will be at 3/8. And that looks like this. So on the wax canvas, of course, you don't want to press this back, and that goes for the actual lining piece here. I just folded that over and finger pressed it, because if you folded back and pressed this with the iron, the heat would transfer to the front. It's not a big deal, but you don't want a lot of wax coming off. And don't get worried if you have lines and stuff that are showing up on the wax canvas if you're using that. That can all be taken out later, but also it does add character. So now we are going to be adding our side pieces, which I have right here. They are called the exterior side bands, and those will get stitched to the left and right sides of the pocket piece. So just flip those over right side together. And one thing I could mention here is You've probably noticed there's no right or wrong side to the wax canvas. It looks the same on both sides, so that doesn't matter too much. So I'm just going to go ahead and clip these side bands on and sew along here with the 3/8 seam allowance, fold them back, press if you're using cotton, and top stitch. And then I'll meet you back here. All right, so we've got our side bands stitched on and then top stitched down each side, and they look so pretty. And we're ready to work with the top zipper cover. Now I've got the one here in cotton. It's called the exterior front zipper cover. There's only one of them. And what we're going to do is we're actually just going to fold it in half lengthwise and press so we get that nice fold down the length of it. And we're going to use that fold as a guide then to put in the fleece. So our fusible fleece goes right up against that center fold, and then we'll center it left to right and press that in place. I'll give it a bit of water. The steam really helps hold it in place. Okay, so now we're ready to top stitch this. So right along the fold here, we'll do the 1/8 inch top stitching. Of course, if you're using wax canvas, you don't use the fleece. So for this one, I'm just going to show you, I didn't use the fleece in there, but I did top stitch along that edge. So that's what we are going to do just for this one. I'll show you exactly where we're going to place it. So now it's going to go along this top edge, and for this we're just going to put on our zipper foot again, and we're going to base this in place with the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Go ahead and base that in place so that it looks like this. Gone along the top of there and also along the sides just to hold those down. And then when we complete that, we will start on the back pocket. Okay, so now we're going to get started on our back pockets, and those are super simple. You'll have your exterior back pocket lining out of your quilting cotton, and your exterior back pocket out of whatever fabric you're using on the outer. And we put the exterior back pocket right side up and the lining wrong side up over this, and the lining is shorter than the outer fabric, and clip those together. Across the top, we'll just sew a 3/8 seam allowance just along here. And when that's done, this is my large version, we can then flip the lining to the back. Now I actually like to press it so that the seam allowance is pressed towards the outer fabric. So this, because that'll give us a little bit of a stiffer edge along the top of the pocket. So you can place your lining down and press and fold up the outer fabric and give that a good press, and then we'll fold the lining to the back and meet the bottom edges. And what this does is it creates a little bit of a sort of like a seam binding across the top of the pocket where you can see the outer fabric poking through. And then when you're looking at the front of the bag, you don't see the lining through the front. So what we'll do then is top stitch along here from the exterior fabric side, and then we're going to get ready to put that on the back of the bag. All right, so here's my back pocket, and I've just done 1 row of top stitching across the top, and I just want to show you in my sample bag I did 2 rows on all of my top stitching. So whatever top stitching you do in the beginning, you want to keep that carried through the bag. I do have some marks from my presser foot where it rubs along there, and I just want to show you a little tip about getting those out. I use a hot iron with no steam, and just the tip of it where it is hot, I can just drag it across there. Of course, my iron is a bit cold right now, so you can't see it, but you can just run the top off. You never want to put the iron directly on it because then you'll end up with sort of a waxy, greasy mark the shape of the iron, but you can use the tip to take out little lines just like that. And then if you do want to take out a large area or press it to get out some wrinkles, you can put a piece of craft paper or Teflon sheet over top of it. I like the Teflon sheet because it actually keeps the wax in the cotton, whereas if you use something absorbent like fabric or paper, when you press with the iron, the wax will suck up into it and then you'll have dry spots. So we do have some tins of Tex wax that you can use over top of the areas where the wax has been worn, but that's really only necessary if you've been out in the rain or you've been using it a lot, kind of like on a raincoat or slicker, and you need to re-wax. So for right now, we're going to finish up this pocket. We'll just fold it in half this way to make a mark for our center sewing. And if you're using cotton for this, you might not see that line, so you can use a piece of chalk, or you can actually just press it with the iron, and later on you won't be able to see that mark. So we will get our exterior back, and then we can line up the pocket piece just right at the bottom, and then we'll sew baste this along the bottom seam and the sides, and then we'll do a little separation stitching here. I like to sew up the fold and then over 1/8 of an inch and down, and I tend to anchor that as well. I'll show you that on the cotton one that I already did. Now let's see if you can see that closely. I've done some back stitching here and here. Now if you're fond of putting in rivets, this is a great place to put a rivet right in the middle. It's a stress point, so that little rivet there will keep it from pulling back and ripping out, or you could just do some back stitching. I've got this all top stitched, or sorry, basted around the edges. And now actually this pocket section is done. So I've got my back pocket section, and I've got my front pocket section. And now we're ready to sew on our top and bottom pieces. If you want to reverse the order actually and do the back first and then the front, it might be a little handier because you'll have that zipper foot on there, and in the next step you're going to sew on the top piece with the zipper foot. And I know you're thinking, why didn't you tell me that before? But you're probably watching this all through before you sew, right? You're not sewing as you go. Yeah, I usually sew as I go. All right, so we're going to sew the top piece on here. Just one of these goes on this pocket piece. Oh, doesn't that Essex linen look beautiful with that cotton? Oh, I just love these together. That is the nautical color in the Essex linen. And then on the back piece, the same thing. And then our base pieces will just get stitched. Well, let's get that out of there. Our base pieces will get stitched at the bottom. Okay, so here's a look with the top and bottom section stitched on. We're going to fold them up and press, and fold this one down and press. The seam allowances will be pressed to the top band and the base. And then we will top stitch on the top section and the base section right along the seam. Okay, so we've got our top and bottom stitched on, and we're ready to put our fleece on the back. This is my large size, and so since I used wax canvas for the small one, I'm going to do something a little bit different. So just from your cutting measurements, the large size should be cut at 14 by 14, and if you're using cotton, the small size will be at 13 by 13. So what we're going to do is cut out some squares out of this fleece before we fuse it on, so that it's not in the seam allowances. And in the instructions I said 2" by 2" just to give you some extra room. If you want to go a bit smaller, 1 3/4 by 1 3/4 you can, but I'll just show you what 2" by 2" does. Oh, well, that pen didn't really work, so that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. So we will cut out a 2" by 2" square off this side, and then use that as a template and do it on that side. And this is just so that we have less bulk in our boxed corners. Put that to the side. So now we're going to fuse this to the back of this full piece. And I like to use just a fat quarter. I always keep this one as a pressing cloth. And the best way to do fusible fleece is to actually get this pressing cloth wet and steam it through. So I just give this a quick spritz with my spray bottle. Make sure I get all the way down to the bottom. I can sort of feel where it is. And then I'm going to press with steam and overlap my pressing area. Your iron, a lot of the times, oh, how embarrassing, look at my dirty iron, has holes where the steam comes out. Mine are pretty small, but some of them have bigger holes, like that big hole there. So overlapping your iron will make sure that all of those areas get fused and you don't have bubbles where it's not fused. So use steam all the way around, and I'll just do that quickly. When we're done, we'll pull it back and check it to make sure it's fused. And I've got a couple spots here on the corners that just need to be done again. A little bit more steam. And then we'll flip it to the front. And I had a big water leakage there from my iron. It leaked while I was fusing. So I've got a bit of a puddle, and I'll just steam that out. Dry it. And this will get out any wrinkles and make sure it's all fused down. Okay. Okay. So now, this is the part of the process where you can put on any labels that you want to affix. So if you want a metal bag label on the back of the bag or the front, now is the time. On the small bag, once again, we didn't put any fleece on, but I'm going to show you how to add a bit of stabilizer to the base to make it a bit stiffer in the next step. For right now, we're just going to cut our corners. We'll just stack these just like we did with the lining, matching up the bottom corners, and measure out 1 3/4 of an inch for the large and 1 1/2 for the small, and trace out those bottom corners, and then we'll just cut them together at the same time so that they match. And for this one, for the exterior, instead of stitching the sides and the bottom, we're going to just stitch the bottom, because then we're going to be putting in the bag base. So with them right sides together, we will use our 3/8 of an inch seam, and so across the bottom, I've got my smaller size here, the wax canvas. So those will be going right sides together and sewing across here. And then I'm going to show you what we're going to do to reinforce the base. Okay, so now we have the seam down the middle of the bottom of the cotton version, and I've pressed the seam allowances open, and I'm going to take my base piece that's cut from Peltex. You could use Decovil for this too, or another stiffener like Stiff Stuff, and I'll put the fusible side down. If you don't have fusible, that's totally okay. You can just clip it in place with some big clips like this, but I do have my iron here, so I'll just use a pressing cloth so that I don't melt my fleece that's on the sides, and give this a quick press with steam to anchor it in place. And let's just check and see if that's, it doesn't have to be stuck fast. We are going to be sewing it in place. So for the cotton version, this is really the only thing you need to do before you can top stitch along the base here. You can just go ahead and top stitch this. Then you can finish it up just like you did with the lining by sewing the sides and boxing the corners. And for that version, we'll be ready to go ahead to make the straps after. So if you're using wax canvas or even vinyl, the base is not going to be quite as sturdy without that fleece in there. The top of the bag, I'll just get my sample. So this would be a vinyl version. The top of the bag ends up being a lot more sturdy, even if this is cotton or vinyl, because you have a double layer there. But the base can be a bit soft. So I'm just going to show you a way to reinforce that. And again, in the wax canvas, there's a lot of layers here and it's quite firm with the pockets and everything, but the base tends to squish a bit. And that's totally okay. I mean, it's going to be filled with stuff. You're going to have your wallet and other things in your bottom of the bag, and that's going to fill up that opening. And it's kind of nice to have that slouchy look. It's supposed to be a rugged, sort of casual look anyway. But if you want to stiffen that up a bit, and this is not in the sewing pattern directions, I'll show you what you can do. So we'll just press that open. And if you weren't going to do anything, if you weren't going to add anything, now would be the time to go ahead and top stitch along here. But if you do want to add something, oh, actually no, first you'd put on the Peltex and then you would do the top stitching. Okay, so just before we put the Peltex on, you can cut a piece of Decoville Light or Stiff Stuff or something that's a little bit thinner, like even Decor Bond would work well, because what we're trying to do is you're trying to add some stiffness but not create it something that's so thick that you won't be able to sew through it. So what I'll do is I'll just flip this over so that I can mark my corners, and the size of this really is just as wide as you want it. If you want it to go up to here, you can make it go up to here, keeping in mind that these additional seam allowances here are going to make it a little bit harder to sew. So I've just cut it within this base section. So this is just going to be a guideline. I'm actually going to trim this out after a little bit wider than this so that we don't have thickness in the seam. So just so that we don't have to sew through so many layers, I am going to cut this out a little bit. So what we're going to be doing here, because we're not actually fusing the stabilizer, because with wax canvas you can't fuse to it. Some vinyls you can definitely fuse to the back side. So if you're using vinyl, you could try fusing this in place. But if it's wax canvas like I'm using here, we're just going to sew baste it. So put this back in here on the wrong side, and we've got it all trimmed away. And now you can clip this just in these 4 spots here where we have a bit of a side seam. So what you can do is you can baste across here and across here, and that's what's going to hold it in place. And we're going to put this Peltex on, and actually I'll use my big clips to hold that on, and my small clips to hold this. So what we'll do is I'll baste here, and then I'll go ahead and do the top stitching down either side, and that's going to hold Peltex in place. And then we're going to have a base of our bag that's a little bit more stiff and a little bit more or less slouchy than I did without. Again, that's totally optional. You really don't need to have this part in here unless you're worried about the bottom of your bag sagging. So let's finish those sides up and box our corners, and then when we come back, we're going to get started on our straps and strap anchors. At the beginning of step 6, we're going to make our straps. So if you've cut your strap from one long piece that is 60 inches wide, either from vinyl, cork, or wax canvas, you don't need to attach them to make a strap. It's ready to go. But if you've got 2 pieces, if it was cut from a piece of fabric that was 44 inches wide off the bolt, we need to join the 2 pieces. we join them on a miter so that when they're folded, there's no bulk in the seam. If we had just stitched them across here like this, we'd have a big bulky seam here, and when you folded it up, it'd make a bump. But when you do it at a 45-degree angle stitching, like so, it disperses that seam, and so that it's quite thin. So what you do is you just overlap 1/4 inch on this side and 1/4 inch on this side. It can be 3/8, it doesn't really matter, as long as they're overlapped enough for a seam allowance. Pin those together, and then we'll draw a line between this little point here and this point here. So I'll just make a little starting pin line so we know that's centered, and then right across, oops, right across there. All right, so that is our stitching line actually, and I'll just go stitch that up for you. Super easy. We've stitched down our pen line, and now we're just going to trim off these corners that we don't need. Ruler. We'll give ourselves a 1/4 inch seam allowance. A smaller seam allowance is better because it'll make it thinner in the folded strap. So now you can see why we overlapped, because if we hadn't, we wouldn't have a seam allowance here and here. And what we can do now is just press this open and flat. And now we're ready to fold our strap. I'm just going to do it with the wax canvas one, because then I don't have to use the iron and show you. But regardless of whether it's wax canvas or fabric, you just need to fold the end over 1/4 inch on both ends. And I'll do that on the other end. And then fold the whole entire thing in half lengthwise. And this is just a standard 4-fold strap. So it's all folded in half lengthwise, and if you're using cotton, you're going to be pressing this as you go. If you're working with cork or vinyl, it's best to actually draw a pen line on the wrong side and instead of doing this fold. So this fold won't actually be needed if you're using vinyl or cork. And we would draw the line and then skip to the next step. Make sure that's nice and even. Okay. So now we're just going to fold these outer edges to the fold line, or if it's vinyl or cork, you'd be folding it to meet the pen line. And then this will stay because it's wax canvas, and if it was cotton, you would be pressing it, but if it's vinyl or cork, you would be using clips to hold it in place like so. Okay, and then after you fold that whole length, you don't need to watch me do the whole thing. You do the same thing to the other side. And then what we'll do is fold it together lengthwise after the whole thing is folded. And again, with vinyl or cork, you just be clipping that together along here. And then you're going to do a top stitch around the outside edges of this whole strap. And when we're done that, the strap will be finished, and then we will do the strap tabs. Strap tabs are pretty easy. You just have one piece, and what we're going to do is we're just going to leave the edges raw. You don't have to fold those over. You just fold it once lengthwise and to the middle again. But this time we're not going to fold it one more time like so. We're going to leave it this way. This is called a 2-fold strap. Okay, so this will help you with having strap tabs that are thinner. If we did it the same way as we did these long shoulder strap, you'd have a strap that was too thick. Okay, so do the same with the cotton if you're using cotton. And for this top stitching on the strap tabs, you just need to go all the way down one side and then the other, and then we're going to cut it in half. Here's my wax canvas strap. It's got my top stitching all the way around my 4 sides, and I've got my strap tab strip ready too. So let's go through the strap first. So the first thing we'll do is take our adjustable slider, and I don't know about you, but I have one side of my machine or my stitching that looks better than the other. The top always looks better than the back, so I try to keep that on the top of the strap as it goes over your shoulder, and the underneath I do keep to the underside. So we'll put the slider through like so that this little end of it goes to the underside. That's going to be trapped in between the strap when you make the adjustable strap. So just thread that through the slider and clip this. I do about 1.5 inches in. And if you're a riveter, you can go ahead and put a rivet in there. I tend to do both stitching and a rivet. So you can sew a box, or you can go back and forth like that. I did that on my cotton one already. So here's my strap, and it's got stitching on the inside. What's important to do now is that you don't twist it. So I've got it laid out flat. You can't see the end of it, but it's not twisted. And what I'll do is I'll thread one of my hooks on there, like so, and then it'll go right back through here, not twisted. Okay, come on. Okay, and I'll just tighten that up a bit. Now we do have wide mouth sliders at Emmaline for use with thicker fabrics like vinyl and cork, and what they are is they're deeper, so they're wider this way so that they can accommodate thicker straps in here. Okay, this is just a regular size for cotton fabric, and they work well with the wax canvas. So then we'll take my other strap ring, my other swivel snap hook, and thread that on there and flip it to the back. So then we'll just clip that together to hold it in place, and also sew this or rivet this in place, and then our strap is done. It's so easy. Let's deal with our strap tabs, and this is 6 inches long, so we're going to cut it right down the middle on the 3-inch line, and we can then thread a tab onto each one. 1 and 2. Okay, and then we'll take this to the sewing machine and baste across here to hold these ends together. And then I also like to put my zipper foot on and sew a really close stitch along here so that you don't have these spinning in here. And that's optional, it's totally up to you, but a lot of times your strap will end up being like that if you don't. So I like to stitch really close to there, and that looks like this. I've already done that on my cotton one. This is basting stitch, and this is my close stitch so that this doesn't slide through. Okay, so now here's our cotton bag, and we just need to attach our strap tabs right over the side seams. So we'll center that over the seam with your seam allowances pressed open so that they lay flat, and clip those in place, and we'll baste these down so that they don't slide around. Most often, I don't know what it is, but I try to get these centered and they end up sliding on me, so I have to take it very slow and make sure they don't get off center. I've got my vinyl version here, and I'll be honest, it didn't work out too good for me. On this side seam, it got really messy and ugly looking, and I don't even really want to show it to you. But then I thought, well, I could redo it and then show you a nice version, but then that wouldn't be really helpful to you. So this is the problem. The problem is I have so much thickness here and such a thick bump with this vinyl that I couldn't get over it with my sewing machine, even with my walking foot. I do have a jig or a hump jumper that you can put up here and go over, but I like to use a walking foot on here because it's a little bit sticky, and the 𝐒𝐇 or walking or hump jumper doesn't actually work with the walking foot. So alternatively, I wished that I had attached my strap tabs to the outside of the bag. So if you're familiar with vinyl and you're comfortable with doing that, instead of sewing these on at this stage, you could use a different method to attach them on the outside. You could use our metal strap ends, or you could sew these in cotton, and that would make things a little bit thinner along here as well. So yeah, those are my ugly side seams. They're not too great. This part sewed beautifully. It was so easy, and then I just got to there and it was a bit of a bump. So something to think about if you're sewing vinyl. Maybe consider the inside top facing in quilt and cotton, and as well as this tab, and that would make it easier to sew over in the final top stitching around the top of the bag. All right, now I've got the exterior of the bag here, and my strap tabs are basted down over the side seams. I've got it sitting here so that the front of the bag is towards the back, and I like my zipper to open from left to right. So in order to do that, with the front of the bag at the back, I have it open to the left. If I wanted the zipper to open from left to right, I would put it this way, okay? Because then it would be opening this way because it's already open. Okay. Oh, remember to open up your zipper pocket because we're going to be turning the bag through there if you aren't doing the lining opening, and so that needs to be open. So we'll flip this over. So the zipper tab is on the right, or the zipper pull is on the right, and we're going to put that in the bag, and we're going to match the side seams and pin around the whole top or clip. You will have your seam allowances open. So I just like to do one side seam and then the other. You do need to make sure that your zipper tabs are pushed down and out of the way, and that your strap tabs are also pushed down, and line up those side seams like so. Then we will clip this all the way around the top, and after it's clipped all the way around the top, you can then take this to the machine and sew around this top edge with the 3/8 seam allowance. And then you can turn it through the zipper pocket opening or the gap in the lining if that's what you chose to do. Okay, now here's the fun part, turning this through the zipper pocket, and you can just actually make this a bit smaller, grab the base and bring it through. Okay, didn't I make that look easy? Okay, so I've got the lining pulled out, or actually here's, tuck the lining in, and we're going to be closing that gap after. For right now, we're not going to close it in case we need to make any last minute adjustments. Put your hand through the opening in the pocket and push out all the corners, okay? And then this inner top facing still needs to get tucked into the bag. Like so. Now, we can take this to the iron and we can press this seam here along the top edge. So you roll it out with your fingers, and oh, all my clips seem to be over at the sewing machine. And clip this along here and press it. So I'll take it over to the ironing board and press it and clip. And then what I'm going to do is sew my top stitching around the top edge. Sometimes we like to do a bit of a wider top stitch around the top edge, like 1/4 of an inch. On my wax canvas version, I did the 1/8 of an inch so that it matched the rest of the bag, and I think it looks really good. I did take out some of the crease marks with my iron, but not too many, because you know what, this is going to get marked up anyway, and that's the whole look of it. The more you use the wax canvas, the kind of the lighter it'll get, and the marks won't be quite as noticeable. And got my strap ready to go on, and this bag is done. And I just want to show you a couple of the features that I like about it. I know a lot of our makers are going to be doing different zipper openings, and one of the reasons I really like this one with the 2 fabric tabs is because you can actually hold it while you open and close. And I purposely made them kind of short and not sticking up, because that way you get a nice clean look from the front. And on the large one as well, you can see that the strap tabs just sit in there quite nicely, so you can pinch it with your finger and close it like that. And one thing that might be nice is a couple rivets through there if you wanted to anchor it in place. You could just do that right there, then they wouldn't go anywhere. So I'm just going to go ahead now and top stitch the rest of this and put my strap on, and it's going to be complete. These are so pretty. So those are my 2 bags, the large and the small. Thanks for being so patient while I swapped back and forth from one to the other while we were stitching. I just really wanted to show you the different variations and different things you could do with different fabrics. And I hope you have a lot of fun with this pattern. If you have any questions, use our contact form on the website at emmalinebags.com, and I'd be happy to answer. And have a browse there. We have all the hardware you need, as well as wax canvas and vinyl. And thanks a lot. I hope you love this pattern as much as I do.